My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 10 years, my family had only one word for me. Failure. Not dreamer. Not creative. Not determined. Failure. The strange thing is, I wasn't lazy. I wasn't irresponsible. I wasn't wasting my life. But in my family, success came with very specific rules. My father was a respected surgeon. My mother was a corporate attorney. My older brother owned a thriving financial consulting firm. My younger sister had graduated from one of the top business schools in the country and was already climbing the corporate ladder. At every family gathering, there were conversations about promotions, investments, medical conferences, and six-figure salaries. Then there was me. The girl who loved stories. The girl who carried a notebook everywhere she went. The girl who spent hours writing scripts, filming short videos, and dreaming about creating documentaries that could inspire people. To me, storytelling wasn't a hobby. It was everything. But to my family, it was a joke. I still remember the Thanksgiving dinner when I was 21. The entire family sat around the table discussing careers. My father looked at me and asked the question I had heard 100 times before. So, Sarah, when are you going to get a real job? The room immediately grew quiet. Everyone looked at me. Waiting. Judging. I forced a smile. I'm working on a documentary project. My brother laughed. A documentary project doesn't pay rent. A few people chuckled. My mother shook her head. You've always been talented, Sarah. It's just a shame you're wasting it. Those words hurt more than I wanted to admit. Because deep down, I wanted their approval. I wanted them to believe in me. Instead, every conversation felt like a trial. Every family dinner felt like an interview I could never pass. Whenever I talked about filmmaking, they rolled their eyes. Whenever I mentioned writing, they changed the subject. Whenever I shared a goal, they reminded me of statistics. You'll never make money doing that. Almost nobody succeeds in that industry. Get a real career before it's too late. At first, I argued. I tried explaining my vision. I tried showing them my work. I tried making them understand. Eventually, I stopped. You can only knock on a closed door for so long before you realize nobody intends to open it. The years passed. While my siblings bought houses, I rented tiny apartments. While they received promotions, I worked freelance jobs to support my creative projects. While they built impressive resumes, I built stories. And according to my family, that made me the disappointment. The failure. The cautionary tale. At family gatherings, relatives would quietly ask my parents about me. I would hear the conversations. Sometimes from across the room. Sometimes from the next table. Sometimes when they thought I wasn't listening. How's Sarah doing? There would always be a pause. Then someone would answer. She's still trying to make the whole filmmaking thing work. The tone said everything. Still trying. As if my dream were a childhood phase I refused to outgrow. As if I were lost. As if I were broken. One Christmas, I overheard my uncle speaking to my father in the kitchen. You should stop supporting her dream. My father sighed. We've tried. She doesn't listen. Maybe failure is the only thing that will teach her. I stood frozen in the hallway. Every word felt like a knife. Not because strangers doubted me. Because my own family did. The people who were supposed to stand beside me. The people who were supposed to believe in me before anyone else. For 10 years, they watched me struggle. For 10 years, they called my dream unrealistic. For 10 years, they treated me like I was one bad decision away from disaster. What they didn't know was that every criticism made me stronger. Every laugh. Every insult. Every doubt. I carried them all with me. Like fuel. Because while they were busy deciding who I was quietly becoming someone they never expected. And one day, the entire country would know my name. Long before my family ever did. The summer after my 24th birthday, I finally stopped waiting for my family's approval. I packed everything I owned into my aging Honda Civic. A few boxes of clothes. My camera. My laptop. And a dream that everyone else seemed convinced would fail. The morning I left, nobody tried to stop me. My father shook my hand like I was a distant acquaintance. My mother forced a smile. Just remember, she said, you can always come back when reality hits. Reality. That word followed me everywhere. To my family, my dream wasn't reality. It was a fantasy. A phase. A mistake. I drove 6 hours to Chicago with less than $3,000 in savings and absolutely no backup plan. Looking back, it was terrifying. At the time, it felt like freedom. My new apartment was barely bigger than a hotel room. The building was old. The elevator rarely worked. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbors arguing through them. The kitchen was tiny. The bathroom leaked. And every month I worried about making rent. But for the first time in my life, every decision belonged to me. There were no family dinners. No lectures. No comparisons. No one telling me what I should become. Only me. And the future. The first year was brutal. I worked wherever I could. During the mornings, I served coffee at a small cafe. In the afternoons, I edited videos for local businesses. On weekends, I photographed weddings and birthday parties. Sometimes I worked 16-hour days. Sometimes more. I was constantly exhausted. But every spare minute went toward building something of my own. Late at night, after finishing work, I sat in front of my laptop creating videos. Documentaries. Short films. Human interest stories. Anything I believed could inspire people. That's when I started my YouTube channel. At first, I imagined people would discover my work quickly. I imagined viewers sharing my videos. I imagined comments pouring in from around the world. Instead, almost nobody watched. My first video received 17 views. 5 of them were probably me. The second video did even worse. The third wasn't much better. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. Still nothing happened. I uploaded consistently. I improved my editing. I studied storytelling. I learned about thumbnails, titles, audience retention. Everything. But growth remained painfully slow. Sometimes I would spend 40 hours creating a video only to receive 50 views. 50. It felt impossible. Meanwhile, social media made everything worse. Every time I opened my phone, I saw former classmates getting promotions, buying houses, getting married, building careers. And then there was me. Still struggling. Still chasing a dream. Still trying to prove everyone wrong. Every few months, I returned home for family gatherings. Those visits were never easy. The questions always came. So, how's YouTube? Making millions yet? Still chasing internet fame? People laughed. Sometimes openly. Sometimes quietly. The result was the same. I became the family joke. One Thanksgiving dinner was particularly painful. My brother had just expanded his company. My sister had received a major promotion. Everyone celebrated their accomplishments. Then my uncle turned toward me. So, Sarah, The table grew quiet. How many subscribers do you have now? I hesitated. A little over 3,000. A few people exchanged glances. Then came the smiles. The kind that aren't really smiles. The kind that say they're trying not to laugh. 3,000 subscribers. After nearly 2 years of work. To them, it sounded pathetic. My father leaned back in his chair. Imagine where you'd be if you spent that energy building a real career. Nobody defended me. Nobody ever did. I stared at my plate. Trying to hide the embarrassment. Trying not to let them see how much it hurt. Because the truth was, part of me feared they were right. What if I was wasting my life? What if this dream never worked? What if I really was the failure they believed I was? Those thoughts followed me back to Chicago. For weeks, they haunted me. The bills kept coming. My channel barely grew. My savings disappeared faster than I could replace them. And one rainy Tuesday evening, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment staring at my computer screen. The latest video had completely failed. After 2 months of work, it had barely reached a few hundred views. I felt defeated. Exhausted. Broken. For the first time in 10 years, I seriously considered quitting. Maybe my family was right. Maybe I wasn't talented enough. Maybe success simply wasn't meant for people like me. I sat there for hours. Thinking. Questioning everything. Then I looked around the apartment. The tiny apartment. The cheap furniture. The overdue bills. The life I had built entirely on hope. And suddenly, I remembered something. Every person I admired had experienced failure. Every successful creator. Every filmmaker. Every entrepreneur. Every dreamer. At some point, they all faced the same choice. Quit. Or keep going. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't done. Not even close. If I failed, I wanted it to be because I ran out of time. Not because I gave up. So the next morning, I got up. Picked up my camera. Opened my laptop. And started working again. What I didn't know was that one video. One story. One unexpected opportunity. Was about to change everything. And within a year, the same family that laughed at my dream would be staring at me on national television in complete shock. For the next 8 months, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I uploaded more videos. Improved my editing. Studied successful creators. Learned new camera techniques. Analyzed audience retention. Experimented with storytelling formats. I did everything people said I was supposed to do. But nothing changed. At least not fast enough. My channel continued to grow. Just painfully slowly. A few subscribers here. A few hundred views there. Small victories that felt meaningless compared to the mountain standing in front of me. Meanwhile, life kept getting more expensive. Rent increased. Equipment broke. Unexpected bills appeared. Every month became a battle. I stopped buying new clothes. Stopped eating out. Stopped spending money on anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Some weeks I survived on instant noodles and coffee. I told myself it was temporary. That success was right around the corner. But deep down, doubt was growing. One afternoon, I opened my banking app. My stomach immediately dropped. After paying next month's rent, I would have less than $600 left. $600. That was it. No wealthy parents waiting to rescue me. No trust fund. No backup plan. No safety net. Just $600 standing between me and complete failure. I closed the app. then opened it again. As if somehow the numbers would magically change. They didn't. That night, I barely slept. For the first time since moving to Chicago, I felt genuinely afraid. Not disappointed. Not discouraged. Afraid. Because dreams are exciting when you're chasing them. They're much less exciting when they're about to leave you homeless. Around the same time, my friendship started falling apart. Not because anyone was cruel. Life simply moved on. My college friends were building careers. Getting engaged. Buying homes. Starting families. Their priorities changed. And honestly, mine had too. I couldn't afford dinners. Couldn't afford trips. Couldn't afford weekends away. Most of my free time was spent working. The rest was spent creating videos. Slowly, the invitations stopped coming. The group chats became quieter. The phone calls became less frequent. Until one day I realized something painful. I was almost completely alone. The people around me weren't abandoning me intentionally. But they were moving forward. While I felt stuck. One Friday evening, I scrolled through social media. Big mistake. Former classmates were celebrating promotions. New jobs. Luxury vacations. Engagement announcements. Success seemed everywhere. Everywhere except my life. I threw my phone onto the couch. Then stared at the ceiling. What was I doing? Seriously. What was I doing? I was 27 years old. Living in a tiny apartment. Working multiple jobs. Barely paying bills. Running a YouTube channel that almost nobody watched. Maybe my family had been right all along. The thought hit harder than I wanted to admit. Because for years, I had used their criticism as motivation. Now I was starting to believe it. Failure. That word returned again. Louder than ever. Failure. 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 It echoed through my mind every day. Then came the worst family gathering of all. Christmas. I almost didn't go. But my mother insisted. Everyone misses you. I should have known better. The moment I arrived, the comparisons started. My brother had purchased a second home. My sister had become a regional executive. My cousins were thriving. Everyone had exciting news. Everyone except me. Eventually, my uncle asked the question. So, Sarah, how's the YouTube thing going? I forced a smile. It's growing. How much money does it make? The room became quiet. I hesitated. Too long. And that hesitation answered the question for everyone. A few uncomfortable smiles appeared. Then my father spoke. Not loudly. Not angrily. Almost casually. You've spent years chasing this dream. He took a sip of coffee. Maybe it's time to admit it isn't working. The words hit harder than anything he'd ever said before. Because this time. Part of me agreed. Nobody defended me. Nobody disagreed. The silence around the table said everything. I left early that night. The 6-hour drive back to Chicago felt longer than ever. The entire way home, I questioned every decision I'd made. Every sacrifice. Every risk. Every dream. By the time I reached my apartment, it was nearly 2 in the morning. I walked inside. Dropped my keys. And sat alone in the darkness. For nearly an hour, I didn't move. I just stared at my camera sitting on the desk. The same camera that had followed me through 10 years of chasing a dream. The same camera that had captured hundreds of stories. The same camera that represented everything I had sacrificed. Tears filled my eyes. Not because I was angry. Because I was exhausted. I had nothing left. No money. No momentum. No confidence. No idea what to do next. Slowly, I opened my laptop. I logged into my YouTube channel. Looked at the numbers. Then opened a blank document. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I was about to write something I never thought I'd write. A goodbye message. A final thank you. A farewell to the dream I had spent 10 years chasing. And for the first time, I was actually ready to quit. What I didn't know was that within the next few days, one unexpected email would arrive in my inbox. An email that would completely change the course of my life. The email arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. At first, I almost ignored it. I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking cheap coffee and staring at my nearly empty bank account when I noticed the notification. The subject line read, "Story recommendation." Normally, I received dozens of emails from viewers. Most were simple messages of encouragement. Others suggested topics for future videos. But something about this one felt different. I opened it. The message came from a woman named Rebecca. She explained that her father had spent 30 years working as a firefighter before passing away unexpectedly. According to her, nobody outside their small town knew his story. He had quietly saved lives for decades. Helped struggling families. Paid for children's school supplies. Bought groceries for people who couldn't afford food. Yet after his death, almost nobody talked about him. The email ended with a simple sentence. "The world celebrates celebrities every day. But people like my father disappear without anyone noticing. I wish someone would tell his story." I read the email 3 times. Then I sat back in silence. For some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about it. There was something powerful about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. No scandals. No controversy. No drama. Just humanity. For the first time in months, I felt inspired. The next morning, I packed my camera equipment and drove 4 hours to Rebecca's hometown. I spent nearly a week there. Interviewing family members. Talking to old co-workers. Gathering photographs. Listening to stories. What started as a small project quickly became something much bigger. The deeper I dug, the more incredible the story became. This man had spent his entire life helping people. Not for attention. Not for recognition. Simply because he believed it was the right thing to do. By the time I returned to Chicago, I knew I had something special. I poured everything I had into the project. Every hour. Every dollar. Every ounce of energy. I spent 3 weeks editing. Perfecting every scene. Every transition. Every piece of music. There were moments when I became so focused that I forgot to eat. Forgot to sleep. Forgot about everything except the story. Finally, after nearly a month of work, the documentary was finished. I uploaded it on a Sunday evening. Then I went to bed. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much. I had experienced disappointment too many times. The next morning, I checked my phone. 5,000 views. My eyes widened. 5,000 views overnight was already unusual. By lunchtime, it had reached 10,000. By evening, 25,000. For the first time, something felt different. People weren't just watching. They were sharing. Commenting. Connecting. The story was spreading. The following day, the documentary crossed 100,000 views. 100,000. I refreshed the screen repeatedly because I couldn't believe it. The comments poured in faster than I could read them. People from around the world were sharing their own stories. Thanking me. Crying. Remembering loved ones. The documentary had become something much bigger than a video. It had become an experience. 3 days later, major social media accounts began sharing clips. Then online news websites picked it up. Then influencers started talking about it. The numbers exploded. 100,000 became 200,000. 200,000 became 500,000. And then 1 million. 1 million views. I remember staring at the screen in complete disbelief. For years, I had dreamed about reaching that milestone. Now it was happening. Not slowly. Not gradually. Almost overnight. I burst into tears. Not because of the views. Not because of the money. Because after 10 years of being told I would never succeed, I finally had proof that maybe I wasn't crazy after all. The momentum continued. People discovered my older videos. Subscribers flooded in. 10,000. 20,000. 50,000. 100,000. The channel began growing faster than I had ever imagined possible. For the first time, YouTube became more than a dream. It became a business. Brands reached out. Media companies contacted me. Sponsorship offers appeared. Interview requests arrived daily. Everything was changing. And it was changing fast. Meanwhile, my family remained completely unaware. They never watched my videos. Never followed my channel. Never paid attention to my work. As far as they knew, I was still struggling in Chicago. Still chasing an impossible dream. Still wasting my life. Whenever my mother called, she asked the same questions. Have you thought about a backup plan? Are you looking for stable work? Maybe it's time to consider something more realistic. I never corrected her. I never bragged. I never mentioned the views. The subscribers. The money. The opportunities. Part of me wanted to. But another part wanted to wait. For years, they had judged me before seeing the results. Now, for the first time, I wanted the results to speak for themselves. So I stayed quiet. I kept working. Kept creating. Kept growing. And 6 months later, an opportunity arrived that would make staying quiet impossible. An opportunity that would put me in front of millions of viewers. An opportunity that would force my entire family to finally see what I had become. A producer from a national television network wanted me on their show. And they weren't interested in interviewing a failure. They wanted to interview a success story. By the beginning of spring, my life barely resembled the one I had been living a year earlier. The documentary had changed everything. My channel was growing faster than I could keep up with. Subscribers continued pouring in every day. Brands wanted partnerships. Companies wanted meetings. Publishers wanted conversations. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about rent. I wasn't checking my bank account every morning with a sense of dread. I wasn't wondering whether I had made a terrible mistake. The dream I had spent 10 years chasing was finally becoming reality. Yet despite everything that had changed, some things remained exactly the same. My family still had no idea. Whenever my mother called, she spoke to me with the same concern she'd used for years. How are things? They're good. Still making videos? Yeah. A long pause would follow. Then she'd change the subject. I almost laughed every time. If she knew what was happening, she'd probably fall out of her chair. But I never told her. Partly because I enjoyed the irony. Mostly because I wasn't ready. I spent so many years seeking validation from my family that I had stopped needing it. Their approval no longer determined my happiness. Their opinions no longer controlled my future. For the first time, I was building a life on my own terms. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed again. I was editing footage when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I ignored unknown callers. Something told me to answer. "Hello?" A cheerful voice responded immediately. "Hi, is this Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes. My name is Karen Reynolds. I'm a producer with National Spotlight." I nearly dropped my phone. National Spotlight was one of the largest television programs in the country. Millions of people watched it every week. For a moment, I honestly thought it was a prank. "Sorry," I said carefully. "Could you repeat that?" She laughed. "I know this probably sounds strange, but we've been following your work." I sat up straight. My heart was pounding. She continued. "Your documentary about firefighter Michael Dawson reached our research team. Since then, we've watched several of your projects." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The producer kept talking. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "We'd like to feature you in a special segment about creators who are changing lives through storytelling." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. 10 years. 10 years of rejection. 10 years of criticism. 10 years of being called unrealistic. And now one of the biggest television programs in America wanted to tell my story. My eyes filled with tears. I tried to answer professionally. Instead, my voice cracked. Karen kindly pretended not to notice. "We'd love to fly you to New York next month." New York. National television. Millions of viewers. The opportunity felt unreal. After the call ended, I simply sat there, staring at the wall, trying to process what had happened. Eventually, I called my best friend, Rachel. The one person who had believed in me from the beginning. The moment she answered, I blurted everything out. By the time I finished, she was practically screaming. "Oh my God, Sarah!" I laughed. Then started crying. Then laughed again. Neither of us could believe it. For the next few weeks, the production team worked closely with me. They interviewed former coworkers, gathered footage, reviewed old projects, researched my story. The more we talked, the more I realized something. This wasn't just an interview. It was a success story. My success story. The story of the girl who had spent a decade being told she would never make it. The story of the dream everyone else dismissed. The story of persistence. The story of refusing to quit. And suddenly, that realization scared me. What if I wasn't ready? What if I embarrassed myself? What if millions of viewers watched me fail? The closer the interview got, the stronger those fears became. One evening, I sat alone in my apartment staring at the invitation email. My finger hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to cancel. Not because I didn't want the opportunity. Because I was afraid of it. Success can be just as terrifying as failure. Failure is familiar. Failure is predictable. Success changes everything. And change is scary. Especially when you've spent years preparing yourself for disappointment. That night, I barely slept. Memories flooded my mind. Every family dinner. Every sarcastic comment. Every insult. Every person who told me to quit. Every moment I doubted myself. What if they were watching? What if my family saw the interview? The thought made my stomach tighten. For years, I had imagined proving them wrong. Now that opportunity was finally here. And surprisingly, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Part of me wanted them to see. Part of me wanted them to understand. Part of me wanted them to realize how wrong they had been. But another part of me wondered whether it mattered anymore. The next morning, I went for a long walk along the lakefront. The city skyline stretched across the horizon. The wind was cold. The water was calm. And for the first time in weeks, my mind became quiet. I thought about the girl who had arrived in Chicago with a beat-up car, a camera, and a dream. I thought about the nights she cried herself to sleep. The bills she couldn't pay. The friends she lost. The years she spent hearing the word failure. Then I asked myself a simple question. If that girl could see this opportunity, what would she do? The answer came instantly. She would get on the plane. She would tell her story. She would stop hiding. And she would finally let the world see who she had become. So I returned home, opened my laptop, and sent one short email. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd be honored to participate. What I didn't know was that 6 weeks later, while sitting around a family dinner table hundreds of miles away, my parents, my siblings, and every relative who had doubted me would suddenly see my face appear on their television screens. And the look on their faces would be something none of them would ever forget. 6 weeks later, the interview aired nationwide. Ironically, I wasn't watching it with my family. I was sitting alone in a hotel room in New York. The network had invited me back for a small media event, and I spent most of the evening nervously staring at the television. Even after everything that had happened, I still felt like the same girl who had driven to Chicago with a broken dream and an old camera. The idea that millions of people were about to hear my story felt surreal. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, my family was gathered for Sunday dinner. Just like they had done for years. My parents. My brother. My sister. Aunts. Uncles. Cousins. The television played quietly in the background while everyone talked. Nobody was paying much attention. At least not yet. According to what I later learned, my uncle was discussing investments when the show's host suddenly appeared on screen. The room became quieter. The special segment began. The title appeared. Dreams Worth Fighting For. My father barely glanced at the television. My mother continued eating. Then the host spoke. Tonight, we're featuring a self-made creator whose inspiring documentaries have touched millions of lives around the world. Nobody reacted. The segment continued. The host smiled toward the camera. This remarkable entrepreneur built a multi-million-dollar media company from scratch after spending years being told her dream would never succeed. A few relatives looked up. My brother glanced at the screen. My sister stopped talking. Then my photograph appeared. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Because the woman standing on the television screen was me. Sarah Mitchell. The family's so-called failure. My aunt later said she genuinely thought she was imagining things. My father reportedly stared at the television in complete disbelief. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. The room became absolutely silent. Then the interviewer said the words that changed everything. This self-made creator built a multi-million-dollar media company while overcoming years of doubt and rejection. My face appeared again. Followed by clips from my documentaries. Footage from my channel. Behind-the-scenes videos. Interviews. Awards. Achievements. The screen displayed subscriber numbers. View counts. Media coverage. Everything I had quietly built over the previous years. One relative finally broke the silence. Wait. Another leaned forward. Is that Sarah? Nobody answered. Because everyone already knew. The host continued speaking. Today, Sarah Mitchell's documentaries reach millions of viewers each month. Her company employs dozens of creative professionals and continues to grow internationally. My father couldn't take his eyes off the screen. Neither could anyone else. For 10 years, they had viewed me as the family disappointment. The dreamer. The unrealistic daughter. The cautionary tale. And now a national television network was introducing me as an inspirational success story. The interview shifted to a segment about my early struggles. I watched myself describe the difficult years. The tiny apartment. The financial stress. The loneliness. The constant rejection. Then came a question from the interviewer. Did anyone ever tell you that your dream wasn't realistic? I smiled. The audience laughed softly. Then I answered. More times than I can count. The interviewer smiled. What kept you going? The room in my parents' house reportedly became even quieter. Because everyone wanted to hear the answer. I paused for a moment. Then said something simple. Eventually, I realized that the people who doubt your dream aren't the ones who have to live your life. Silence. Complete silence. My family knew exactly who I was talking about. I never mentioned them by name. I didn't need to. The truth was obvious. The interview continued. The audience applauded. The host praised my work. Several people I had interviewed appeared on screen sharing how the documentaries had impacted their lives. Then the segment ended. The audience stood and applauded. The camera slowly faded to commercial. And for several long seconds, nobody at my family's dinner table said a word. My sister was the first to speak. How much did they say her company was worth? Nobody answered. My brother stared at the television. My uncle looked completely stunned. Then my mother quietly whispered something. According to my cousin, it was only 3 words. We were wrong. My father remained silent. For years, he had predicted my failure with absolute confidence. For years, he had treated my dream like a childish fantasy. Now he had just watched millions of viewers celebrate the success he never believed was possible. And perhaps for the first time in his life, he had no words. That night, my phone exploded. Text messages. Missed calls. Emails. Social media notifications. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. Former classmates. Distant relatives. Old acquaintances. Everyone had seen the interview. Everyone wanted to talk. And sitting there in my hotel room, I already knew what was coming next. Because for 10 years, my family had watched me struggle. For 10 years, they had called me a failure. Now they had finally seen the truth. The only question was whether they would have the courage to face it. And 2 days later, I got my answer. My father called. 2 days after the interview aired, my phone rang. I already knew who it was before I looked at the screen. My father. For a moment, I simply stared at the phone. 10 years. 10 years of criticism. 10 years of doubt. 10 years of hearing what I couldn't do. And now he was calling. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to let it ring. Instead, I answered. Hello. There was a long silence. Then my father spoke. Sarah. His voice sounded different. Older somehow. Less certain. We saw the interview. I looked out the hotel window. The city lights stretched across the skyline. I figured. Another silence followed. Then he said something I never expected to hear. We're proud of you. The words should have felt amazing. For years, I had dreamed about hearing them. Yet somehow, they didn't feel the way I imagined. Not because I was angry. Because I no longer needed them. The approval I spent my entire life chasing had arrived years too late. A week later, my family asked if we could meet. I agreed. Not because I needed closure. Because I wanted peace. The following Sunday, I drove back to my parents' house. The same house where I had spent years feeling invisible. The same dining room where my dreams had been mocked. The same table where I had been labeled a failure. When I walked through the door, everyone was already there. My parents. My brother. My sister. Several relatives. The atmosphere felt completely different. Nobody was laughing. Nobody was making jokes. Nobody was questioning my choices. For the first time in my life, every person in that room looked uncomfortable. And honestly, I understood why. Because the truth can be difficult to face. Especially when it forces you to confront your mistakes. We sat together in the living room. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then my mother began crying. "I owe you an apology." My chest tightened. She wiped her eyes. "We all do." My father slowly nodded. "I should have believed in you." The room remained silent. My brother looked down at the floor. My sister couldn't meet my eyes. One by one, they admitted what I had known for years. They had underestimated me. Dismissed me. Judged me. They thought they were protecting me from disappointment. Instead, they became part of it. When my sister finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." For years, I had imagined this moment. In those fantasies, I usually won the argument. I proved everyone wrong. I reminded them of every cruel comment. Every insult. Every moment they laughed at my dream. But sitting there, something surprising happened. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Because carrying resentment for 10 years is exhausting. And at some point, I realized something important. Success isn't revenge. Success is freedom. Freedom from needing validation. Freedom from needing approval. Freedom from needing everyone else to understand your journey. My father looked at me. His eyes were filled with regret. "What can we do to make this right?" The room became completely quiet. Everyone waited for my answer. I took a deep breath. Then I smiled. Not because the past didn't matter. Because I had finally moved beyond it. I spent years trying to prove my worth to you. My voice remained calm. Steady. For the first time, nobody interrupted. Nobody argued. Nobody looked away. Then I continued. Then I realized I didn't need your permission to succeed. Tears filled my mother's eyes. My father lowered his head. The words hung in the air. Simple. Honest. True. I wasn't there to punish anyone. I wasn't there to embarrass them. Life had already taught all of us enough lessons. What mattered now wasn't who had been right. What mattered was what came next. Over the following hours, we talked more openly than we ever had before. About mistakes. About expectations. About dreams. About fear. For the first time, my family saw me not as the daughter who disappointed them. Not as the dreamer they worried about. Not as the failure they expected. They saw me as I truly was. And maybe, for the first time, I saw them too. Not as villains. Not as enemies. Just imperfect people who had been wrong. Very wrong. But human. As the evening came to an end, I stood outside preparing to leave. The sun was beginning to set. The sky glowed orange and gold. For a moment, I looked back at the house. The house that had once felt like a prison. The house where my confidence had been tested. The house where so many painful memories had been created. And suddenly, I felt grateful. Not for the criticism. Not for the doubt. But for what those experiences had taught me. Because sometimes the people who believe in you the least end up teaching you the most important lesson of all. Your future does not belong to them. It belongs to you. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove toward the life I had built for myself. Not the life others expected. Not the life others approved of. My life. My dream. My story. And for the first time, I didn't need anyone else's permission to live it. Moral of the story: never let other people's expectations define your future. The people around you may doubt your dreams, question your choices, or underestimate your potential. But their opinions are not your destiny. Success comes from persistence, belief, and the courage to keep moving forward when nobody else can see the vision you carry inside. Sometimes the greatest achievement isn't proving others wrong. It's learning that you never needed their approval in the first place.